two-time Edgar Award-winning author Lori Roy is with me today. Welcome, Lori.
Hello, pleasure to be here. Thank you for
Oh,
having me.
yeah, my pleasure completely. I I want to get into your new novel, of course, mostly. But you've had an illustrious career as a fiction crime writer, a great deal of success and accolades. And I guess my first thing before we start talking about Lake County, it's the first time you win, right? The Edgar Award. Where are you? Like, what's happening? Are you like Tom Cruise? You dancing in your underwear around the house? Like, how does that work?
Maybe on the inside I was. There's a wonderful event put on by the Mystery Writers of America. Marjorie Flax leads that effort every year, and they have a banquet, a dinner where people across the industry attend, and it's in New York City. And so I'm sitting with my husband, my agent, Jenny Bent, my editor at the time, my publishing people that were involved at a table, along with, all the other nominees and all the other categories and all the people that have supported them and worked to put the books on shelves. And the first the Edgar for debut, Mary Higgins Clark, presented that award, which was a pretty terrific part of the story that I like to remember. And so, yeah, they go through all the categories and your name is called, and it's just it's a great thing to be part of, whether you win or you don't win, because I've been on both sides of it. And then we had pink champagne at the hotel bar afterwards, and that was great fun as well.
Well, I mean, I guess, once you get published, right? There's a certain, you feel good about it. The publishers want, more from you. But I think to get that kind of accolade or recognition must feel a little different.
Well, to be perfectly honest, I of course enjoyed it, but I felt like, is this as good as it's ever going to get? And it's all downhill from here. Because it's really all about the next book. And
Sure.
I don't know what other authors' experiences are, but I find that it never gets easier. And so it is, I've learned to enjoy those moments and be a little more relaxed in them, but it's always, it's what's ahead of you, and
Sure. I like to talk about creativity a lot on the podcast. So what I, I ask this of almost everyone, but what is your creative process like? I mean, I get all different answers. Some people, they have to outline their book. They can only write at their computer. Some people say, I'm singing my opera in the shower, and the thoughts just kind of, I get
yeah.
my sparks from there. What's your process?
I would call it pretty much controlled chaos.
I
The
like
control
that.
the control varies throughout. Um, Little things are sort of what inspire me and kick off the idea for a book. And it's a little different with every book. And I don't outline before. I usually have a few ideas of scenes that I'm working towards. Maybe that initial inciting incident, we call it, that thing that, oh, this is going to be a book about whatever, twisted the status quo. But as I near the end of a book, for example, I'm working on my next one right now, coming up on a deadline. And as I get near the end of the book, that's when I step back and I outline it after the fact. I break out the Excel spreadsheets, which I know well from my days as a tax accountant. And I do scene by scene. I lay in the timeline, what's the point of view character, a short line about what happens. And that's how I kind of get my hands around the book. And from that, I will write the very ending or move things around as necessary, because a big part of suspense is structure. How do the events unfold? In what order? You got to play fair with the reader. I'm a big believer in that. So it's chaos. I'm being very careful what part of my office I show you. I got this pretty door back, because the rest of it, it's like it's spiraling. I can feel it like a gravitational pull over there.
I get it. Well, of course, I had an opportunity to read Lake County. And I say that this on the podcast a lot. My litmus test for a book is its irresistibility. Right. So for me, if it's irresistible, if I just can't help the pull to it, I have to keep knowing. The fact that I have to leave the book at any point, it's still troubling me that I need to get back, because it's just irresistible to get to the end. I mean, you hit all the bells, right, for this book, because I sat down around 9 o'clock to read the book, and I read it in one sitting, right? I could
Oh,
not stop. I had to know, because it's a little bit like a hot potato. I mean, you just keep jumping. Just when you think you know what's going to happen, you really don't. It just keeps layering. Like every time you think, like, okay, this is the event, this is where we are. We're in a new event, and a new event, and a new event. And I mean, to me, I just found like I couldn't stop. You just keep going. It was such a great read, such an easy read. And I wanted to start there by complimenting you. I truly enjoyed the book.
thank
Again,
you.
yeah, and it's for anybody who hasn't, read it. I mean, it's being released, I think, within the next few weeks. Am I correct?
June 1st. Yes.
June 1st. Yeah. I mean, this is a must read, right?
Thank
It's
you.
just
I
got
like
this.
that. Mhm.
This is just a mix. I find that fiction, like mystery fiction, is a great love of mine. Literary fiction is my greatest love, or my genre where I'm most happy hanging out. And this kind of mixes the two, right? Because there is a literary fiction feel to it. There's this historical, just this is a family that's been around for a long time. They have a history. I like that. I like getting into the messiness of that. Right. And then we also have this like series almost of mysteries unfolding all simultaneous to one another. Uh, and I just thought it was incredibly unique, and I really enjoyed that. I think this was a different vibe than what you've previously written. And also the historical element of it, right?
Mhm.
And I don't think I'm giving away too much where I say that Marilyn Monroe is an actual character in your book.
Yes.
Yeah. So how did that feel? I mean, to be writing for a living person, like putting words in somebody else's mouth. I mean, how was that? How did you create that?
Yeah, that was one of those I wasn't sure I'd be able to do it, to be honest, because Marilyn Monroe is obviously a historic fiction figure. The Charlie Wall also is, and anyone who's from Florida probably knows Charlie Wall as the kind of father of organized crime in Florida, Tampa specifically,
I
and
didn't
his
know that.
murder. Yeah, and so his murder is, he was murdered 50 some years ago, and it remains unsolved. So I had really two historic figures, and part of it was just, let's just give it a try. I had done a great deal of research, really long before I had any thoughts of being a writer. I read a lot about Marilyn Monroe and sort of that whole era, that whole Rat Pack era. When I was in college, I went through this just obsession with reading biographies. And I read from people, you know, from the politicians of the time, the gangsters, the actresses, the actors, the entertainers. And then when I started to hone in on maybe Marilyn as my character, I read a lot of, you know, writing that she had done, watched her movies, looked for interviews, sought clips that would show me her real voice versus the character Marilyn Monroe voice. And at the end of the day, I just had to give it a shot. And then I describe it as she was very happy to be on the page. And then I had to tackle the kind of my author guidelines, I guess, for myself. I wasn't going to use Marilyn if it was just a gimmick. That seemed disrespectful. It didn't fall into the right thing to do category. And so you used that term litmus test earlier. That's the term I use for my litmus test. Was if she brought something to the book, had something to say that nobody else could say, that meant she belonged. And right away, I got this, hell yes, I got something to say. And she said it. She, in a great extent, carries a couple of the bigger themes of the book. So that was a very long answer to, I just had to give it a shot. And because you never know, when we make up characters as writers, you can go with your gut, what feels right, what feels comfortable, what rings true. But then when you have a real person, it's, can you do all that, make this real person ring true? And so, you know, I felt at ease writing her. I hope that it reads that way to people.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, it did, and I was curious for the choice. Like, when I was first reading it, I said, "Why not just fictionalize a famous movie star? Like,
Mhm.
why particularly make it Marilyn Monroe?" And I guess as it evolved, I realized it was almost a way of communicating, I mean, obviously, 'cause you picked a lot of the traits known to be true to Marilyn, you know, to highlight in the book, but I guess it was a way of communicating to your audience that the magnitude of the store, but I'll put it to you and I'll say, what was your reason for putting this real character in as opposed to just fictionalizing a movie star?
Which, yes, and that was the decision that I looked at early on. Very early on, I considered making that character more of a B movie actress. I did a lot of research on the kind of the Scream movies of the time, where you had the alien abduction of the damsel, or the gorilla, or the monster, or they're all damsel. They were all damsels. And that was one way to go. And then when we have here, and I live in St. Petersburg, Florida, and part of our downtown culture are these beautiful murals that are on the side of many of our buildings. Famous artists come in and they're commissioned, and it's just a big part of, there's tours around them. And I'm driving through downtown, and one of these murals is a 2-story tall Marilyn. And it's the very strong Marilyn. It's very well-known image of her in the black turtleneck. So
Yeah.
she is the strong force, not the skirt flying up in the breeze Marilyn. And that's when I thought, what if it is Marilyn? Because she has been through, kind of to your point, communicating to the author or to the reader. She is arguably the greatest icon we've ever seen. And what does that do to a person to live under the weight of that? And that's what she illustrates in the book is what it's done to her. And I felt when she came onto the page, she was using this whole history of hers to communicate to the reader something which I think is very universal and very relevant today. And that's be careful if you're wishing for fame, because here's all the things that go with it. And now I'm sitting here with a phone in my hand talking to you. Fame is in every one of our hands in this phone, or the hope for fame. It's one video, one viral video, one perfect post, on whatever, Twitter or Insta, and it can be in your sights. It's easier than ever. So,
But right, at what cost? Like the rot, as you say in the book, the rot underneath the shine, right?
yeah.
Well, I mean, you definitely captured that. I mean, I felt right away, as opposed to if you just fictionalized the character and likened her to Marilyn Monroe, which would have given me, of course, the visual. But because you use this historical person, obviously I had the picture a lot better
Mhm.
because of that. And that was what I began thinking about. I said it has to be that she's trying to communicate to us, the power of this person, the magnitude of her stardom, right? Rather than just saying a movie star that really did, have a component in the whole tale.
Mhm.
From the beginning, from the first trip to the grocery store forward, right? You get it because it's her. Like, right, that's why these experiences start. Well, that's what, because you first you think, oh, I'm going to the grocery store. How big a deal can that be? But Marilyn Monroe couldn't do anything easy, right?
Mhm.
She wasn't able to go anywhere or do anything, and that's a level of stardom that very few get. I mean, I certainly think there are rock stars or actresses, that get have fame, but that level of fame that she had does come with a price, and it's not ordinary fame, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, a lot of people, I guess, take advantage of famous people to a certain extent, and I think you captured this balance, right? She's arguably one of the best characters in the book, right? Because even she keeps flipping a little bit, like we're never sure what she's doing. And I thought that was, another interesting twist on the choices that you made. You want to believe she's going to be a hero, or that she's a hero in the book, but you're never sure. You keep kind of teasing us with who she is.
Well, and that was part of when I talked about, her coming on the page and being happy to be there and being forthright with who she was. She couldn't be this caricature of herself. She couldn't be all good or all glamorous or all bad, because she was none of those things. She was all of those things. Um, she had this. The book also takes a look at the difference between power and strength. So she certainly had power in many respects, and we see her use that power to manipulate people, maybe try to, I guess, manipulate people's an easy way to say it. But then she also had a true strength, and it's the battle between those two
And
is her character.
and there's intelligence there, right?
Yes.
Certainly, and I don't want to give away your plot, but certainly as we keep falling through what's happening, she she shows how intelligent she actually was.
Yeah, she was a big reader. She wrote some of her own, I guess you call it poetry, or snippets of thoughts and things like that. Um, she was very intelligent, but when we go back to that idea of power, some people gain their power through using someone else, through climbing on someone else's shoulders, and yet a whole industry climbing on her shoulders and wanting her to be a certain thing because that's what would make them money. Of course, that's signified through the character of Siebert, who is her fictional photographer in the book. He is nothing without Marilyn. And
Right.
everybody knows that except him. Um,
Do you think he doesn't know? Because I didn't read him that way. Is if that was your intention. I read him as he sort of knew the truth and it angered him.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, that is a more developed way of saying it. And which is what makes him desperate.
Right. I mean, he
You know?
wanted to believe she was nothing without him, but he
Yeah.
appeared to me to know the truth that it was the other way around.
When it came down to it and his livelihood is suddenly in jeopardy, yes, he 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 has to face the hard truth. But the ego of someone like that does not give in easily.
And was it easy to write such a bad guy?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He
I always
was
wonder
easy.
about getting in the minds of the bad people, right? Because if you don't think
Yeah.
that way, that can't be easy.
And it does come down to the bad guy doesn't think he's bad. The bad guy has his motivations and he thinks the ends justify the means. So when you find that, what is their motivation? Who are they and how do they think? Then that's when it falls in place. It's those real basic fundamentals that make up someone that thinks like that. I found the same thing true of part of the book involves, we talked a bit about Charlie Wall, sort of the father of organized crime. So I do have some organized crime in the book, and I had to tackle a mob boss and his consigliere and the thugs around him. And I wasn't real sure about tackling that because I'd never done it. But again, I kind of joked that it was all my years working as a tax accountant kind of gave me insight into how a criminal would think. Um, so I also found that I was very comfortable writing it. I didn't struggle like I thought I might. I read a lot of Ace Atkins' work. Ace is a great writer. Many people will know his work. He wrote extensively about Charlie Wall, this real character in the book, when he was a reporter years ago here in the Tampa area. So I owe him a lot to helping me get comfortable in that world.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, organized crime is a huge part of is really a huge part of how, what pushes the story along.
Mhm.
Did you have a favorite character?
Um,
A
you
character
know,
was hardest to say goodbye to?
there was I really enjoyed writing all the characters in this book. That isn't always the case. Some are harder, and I have to take a few swipes at them before I get comfortable. It's kind of like, you meet somebody at a cocktail party, and certain people you strike up an easy conversation and it's very fluid and comfortable. And another person who you may like perfectly well, but you don't have that, you have to work a little harder. It's sort of the same. One character that I really liked, and she just isn't a real big part in the book, and I can't even remember her name, which is bad. She is the sheriff's girlfriend in the book.
The Truett's mother.
Truett's mother, Eileen, maybe, is that right? Eileen Holt.
Eileen, I think, yeah. Inez yeah, Eileen.
Yes, Eileen. She was a smart, independent, no nonsense character. And got to remember, we're talking about women living in the 50s. And I enjoyed her. I could see circling back to her someday.
Sure, she was good, but she was definitely a supporting character.
Yeah, yeah,
Right? She's not in any of the real, meaty scenes.
no, no. She was definitely a supporting character. Um, and that's what I mean. I didn't spend a whole lot of time with her, but I enjoyed who she who she was, who she came out on the page to be.
Sure, strong, loyal, good mother.
Yeah,
Uh,
and self-reliant, and she was nobody's shrinking violet, to be terribly cliche. She spoke up for herself, and I liked that about her.
a very good character. I mean, all these characters are really well developed, in light of the fact that, there's a limited amount of time to tell their story. And as I said, it's kind of got a little bit of that literary fiction feel to me. This is not just a pure mystery, right? I mean, you go back, you talk, you give us more backstory than you usually get for a mystery novel. And I love that you're just all up in these people's lives, right? That's what literary fiction is kind of all about. You're just all
Yeah.
up in their drama and their history and their parents and their lives. And you give us that, right? And I love that messiness. And then you throw like a mystery and just everyone's 2 seconds away from dying, sort of like the whole, and there's so many of them, right? So you throw it all. That's why I said it's like you can't stop because you just keep getting it just keeps coming, right? It's like somebody like the snowballs are just keep pelting you in the head. Um,
I like that description.
so that's what I loved about it because like there is this backstory. There's these messy people and their emotions and their lives and who's a liar and who's just in love and whose parents did what and they came from this or that. I mean, how these people have this past history. There's all that angst.
Mhm.
And then all this other stuff going on simultaneously. You don't know where to look first. And that's the situation you put your characters in, right? They don't know where to look first. Like they all have these colossal, you know, problems going on, emotional life problems, major decisions. And then
Mhm.
on top of it, the hits just keep coming. Right. So I really loved that. I found it to be quite unique. And it was a great book.
Well, thank you. That's really great to hear. And I do one of the first pieces of advice I got years ago, first writers conference I ever went to, was write the book you want to read. And the mistake a lot of new writers make is they write the book they want to write. We lean into our strengths and we write about the things that we're comfortable with and we meander, and but writing the book you want to read forces you to learn to tackle the different aspects of the craft. And I love a book with characters that I can fall in love with or hate vigorously. um, I want a setting that is rich and draws me in, and I want a book that kind of leaves me thinking about life a little differently when I've finished it. So I want a book with a plot that makes me want to turn the page. I want all that. So that's what I aim to give a reader. Um, so fingers crossed I've done that.
You definitely did that. You definitely hit all your hit all your checks. You checked everything off on your list there because it's good. It's a great read. As I said, it's a fast read. It's an interesting read. And you created these just multi-layered, complex people, all thrown together in this relatively short period of time. Right? I mean, the book,
Mhm.
I think, from beginning to end seems to happen over a period of a few days.
Yes, that
Um,
that's true.
So, I mean, that's also a pressure cooker, right? This isn't a
Mhm.
story that's laying out like most books lay out over an extended period of time. Seasons change in most books, right? Like the
Yeah,
characters keep going on. This is a pressure cooker. Like, hey, there's these messy lives of everybody at a crossroads at the same time, and just a whole lot of drama is going to come their way.
yeah,
So that
yeah.
I thought was unique. I hadn't read a book like that really in a really long time. I found it. I was very enthralled with this read. I liked it. I recommend it highly. It was well done. So I wanted to get
Thank
that
you.
out.
Thank you to all of the above.
uh, Now, how did it compare to to writing your other books, which are more crime procedurals, I feel like in nature. So how did it feel to kind of change things up a little?
Well, I, by and large, sort of like in this book, there is a sheriff, and the sheriff does have a point of view in a few chapters, but not a great deal of the book is devoted to tracking down the clues and solving the crime. And most of my books are the same. They have a limited view of a sheriff or a police presence of some sort. Um, to me, I know that this book is different. I would say there are lighter moments, not lighter like funny, but lighter like we have a mother, a daughter, and sort of then the Marilyn Monroe character is the pseudo aunt to my protagonist, who's an 18-year-old young woman. There is the relationship between these women, what they come to appreciate in one another, the affection and the commitment that they have to one another. All my books, in some way or another, explore the strength of women. Women are the leads in my books for the most part. This one, the orange blossoms are blooming while they're doing it. It's just there's and that's the thing I love about Southern Gothic is you take the beauty. I mean, what that's like there's all the senses are engaged when you think about an orchard where the orange trees are in bloom. I mean, that's just a beautiful, you can smell it, you can see it, you can feel it. And then that butts up against the uglier parts. And in this book, it's the uglier parts of power and what it can do to people and corrupt people and exploit people, and butt it up against strength, which is the more admirable quality that should be nurtured and respected. So I don't know, I'm going off on a tangent. I don't even remember where I started.
No, well, I liked the relationship between Marilyn and Inez, right? There's something to the way they were connected so deeply, right? Because of their history.
Mhm,
You almost got the sense that they counted on each other only for a long period of time.
mhm.
That's like still there, right? That's still there. Their lives have changed. They're so different. But you sort of get to a point where you would ordinarily think as Inez, and I hope I'm saying her name right. Um, Inez, is that
It's Inez, but it's
Inez?
fine.
Sorry. Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
um, there gets a point where you think, why is she just not like, hey, you know what? You are too much for me, right?
Yeah,
Like you
yeah,
almost think like she's like, hey, like I kind of straighten, like my life is in a good place, and you bring a lot of toxicity my way. Like you wonder why she never pushes away, from Marilyn, why she never walks away. Um, and when you get towards the latter scenes, you sort of see why, right? These women have a
mhm,
connection that's not as obvious to you in the beginning of the book, as all great books, are. By the time you get to the end, you say, oh, these women deeply depended on each other at a time when none of these other people were around, right? Like that
yeah,
becomes clear to you. Uh, and so I really liked their relationship.
yeah. When I bringing Marilyn on to the page, and I wanted to, I wanted to explore her as just a person, which is what I think she craved, and maybe knew it, maybe didn't know it. And so I gave her this one small fictional town in Florida and this pseudo family as the one place she could go in the world really, and just be Jean, which is what they call her. And that's the only thing they've ever known her as, because she's been coming there to seek sort of comfort and support since she was Norma Jean, since before stardom led her to change her name and her hair color and all these things. So that's who Inez is. Inez is the beginning of that. They grew up in the orphanages in Los Angeles, which is true of Marilyn Monroe. There's a reference in the book to her seeing as a young girl, maybe 9, 10 years old, looking out an orphanage window and seeing the RKO water tower out her window, and that was a studio at the time, the RKO Studios, and that was sort of her first, when her dream first started to percolate. And so that's when I bring the fictional Inez in, as that's when they met, were these days in the orphanage. And Inez, being a little older than Marilyn, was her caregiver. She looked out for Marilyn. She was protective of her from when Marilyn was like 10, 11 years old. And that relationship has continued up into the point we meet them in Lake County, Florida.
Right, that relationship, but you sort of give us that backstory, but
Mhm.
you still like there's this sense that, as I said, why doesn't she just like say, hey, you get a swirl of toxicity every time you're around.
Yeah.
Like, like why doesn't she ever just cut her off and say, look, I live my life a little different now, or put her foot down with some stuff. And I didn't quite get it. And I thought you did it quite lovely. At the end, that those some of those scenes, which again, I don't want to give away or spoil anything, so I'm
Mhm.
careful to toe the line. But we get some scenes at the end where it clicked for me, where I said, "Oh, right, these women depended on each other in a way
Mhm.
that it's still there. It'll never go away. You'll never break that bond."
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's family, but not blood family, but family nonetheless.
Right, like, that bond really wasn't going anywhere. There was something so raw to the bond that they had, that nothing really, I guess, Marilyn does really is ever gonna change that. It exists, it's there, it's pure, and no matter what you think is happening, it's not, right? Like, it was I liked that. I liked their relationship. Probably my favorite relationship in the book was that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
So tell me, what's on the agenda? What do we have coming up for book-wise?
Well, the one that I'm talking about coming up on a deadline, so I'm working frantically. um, I haven't worked up the slick pitch for it yet, but I'll be staying in Florida, heading down south to the Big Cypress Swamp, and it will be a present day book. Um, and that's about all I got for you right now. Right now.
Okay.
I did some traipsing through the swamps for this one. Had an encounter or two with an alligator that I won't soon repeat. Um, but yeah, I love a gritty setting, and the swamp is a gritty place.
Agreed.
Gritty, beautiful place. Yeah,
Well, I hope you'll come back and talk to me again when the new book comes out.
absolutely. Absolutely. It's been a joy. Thank
And
you.
I'll definitely put a link up to you to for how readers can get the book. I highly recommend the book. Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to the next book with bated breath.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm going to say goodbye from the podcast.